Ian Blackford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It is a pleasure to follow the Prime Minister. Of course, I wish her no ill will, and if she does choose to resign today, can I wish her all the best for her future career. Mr. Speaker, in many respects, this is not a debate that we should be having. If we reflect on what happened last night, it is a government that brought its Brexit deal in front of Parliament, and it lost by a majority of 230. Mr. Speaker, something which is quite unprecedented. A defeat for the government, with our own backbenchers and the opposition in a united manner voting against this government. And if we go back just a short few weeks to December, of course there was a motion of confidence in the Conservative Party, and in that situation a majority of government backbenchers voted against the Prime Minister. And let me say, when I go back and I listen to the intervention for the honourable gentleman from Rayleigh and Wickford, he said that the members of the ERG would be going through the lobbies to support the government tonight. And, Mr. Speaker, that does indeed say it all. It's the ERG that has captured the Prime Minister.
Exactly.
And the real reality of where we stand today is that when the Prime Minister went to the United Kingdom in an election in 2017 in anticipation of getting a majority, they got a bloody nose and she came back as a minority Prime Minister. Well, you know, you can only... I will give way in a second. I would say to the government benches, if you just settle down a little, you would love to be in the position that the Scottish National Party are in, because we have a majority of seats from the people of Scotland. I give way.
I'm grateful to the right honourable gentleman for giving. I thought perhaps he could just inform the House how many seats in Westminster, how many Westminster MPs did the SNP have before the 2017 election, and how many did they have after the 2017?
I'm very grateful to the Prime Minister for that intervention. Can I say to the Prime Minister, there are 59 seats in Scotland. The Scottish National Party hold 35 of them, a majority of seats. We have won every election to the Scottish Parliament since 27. The Prime Minister could only dream of being in a situation where she has a majority. But let's come back to the fundamentals of this. We have a Prime Minister that is captured by a right-wing Brexiteers. Because the issue is, when you have a minority, you have to be able to work across party. But we've got this. I will in a second. But we've got the situation that the Prime Minister is beholden to the DUP, but the DUP will only support her in very certain circumstances. This is not just, Mr. Speaker, about the defeat of the government last night on Brexit. It is a government that is stuck, that can't get its legislative programme through. It has no majority support in this House. It is a government that is past its time. And if the government had any humility, had any self-respect, it would reflect on the scale of that defeat last night. We shouldn't be having this motion of no confidence. The government should recognise it has no moral authority. The government, quite simply, should go.
Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Right honourable gentleman for giving way. But I think his speech is a little eccentric, Mr. Speaker. he seems to think that the ERG and the DUP control the Prime Minister. Why then did 120 of us vote against the Prime Minister yesterday? If we're in such control, we're clearly not doing it very well.
Exactly. Perhaps let me explain. The honourable gentleman, in supporting a motion of no confidence against the Prime Minister, as he did, clearly expressed that he doesn't have the confidence of the Prime Minister. And what the ERG is seeking to do is to make sure that the government delivers what they want, which is a hard Brexit, a no-deal Brexit perhaps, against the interests of the majority of the people in the United Kingdom. But here is the reality. Having listened very carefully to what the Prime Minister has said today, there is no change to the government's position. The red lines remain in place. And I fear that what is really going on is that we have a government that is seeking to run down the clock. In the knowledge that they have, and I will in a minute, safe in the knowledge that the Withdrawal Act has gone through, seeking to drive Parliament to the margins and to make sure that we do crash out of the European Union with no deal as a serious prospect. All of us, Mr Speaker, should recognise the risks of no deal that no sane person in this House would support, and the government should unilaterally take that risk to all of us and to all our constituents off the table. I happily give way.
I thank the honourable gentleman. He must agree that the Prime Minister is a record setter, record levels of poverty, record levels of homelessness, and now a record defeat in majority that any government has had. Now, maybe not in our lifetime. Do you think that majority will ever get beaten?
Well, I would say to my honourable friend, because he is my honourable friend, it's a record level of lack of humility that we see from this government, and he's absolutely right. We have had 10 years of austerity from this government. People are hurting. We can see that through the poverty figures. We can see it through the forecasts of the increase in poverty that will take place. And the harsh reality, I have to say to the honourable gentleman, we know from the government's own analysis that in any version of Brexit, that the economy of the United Kingdom will be weaker than it would be than if we stayed in the European Union. That is the fundamental point of this, and I say respectfully to the Prime Minister, I understand the issue of respecting the vote in 2016, but when the government knows that the economic circumstances of its citizens are going to be negatively affected, we have a responsibility to say to the people, on the basis of the information that we now have, we have a duty to go back to you, because nobody, Mr Speaker, irrespective of how they voted in that referendum, voted to make themselves poorer. And I have to say, and I say it with respect to the Prime Minister, that it is shameful that we are not being honest with the people of this country. We need to waken up. We need to waken up, and let's take the announcement from Jaguar Land Rover. Now, I know there are many reasons why Jaguar Land Rover are restructuring. We know it's to do with diesel cars, we know it's to do with China. But at the same time, Jaguar Land Rover made it absolutely crystal clear that Brexit is a fundamental issue which is driving that restructuring. No government, Mr Speaker, should be in the situation that it wants to put unemployment on the table, that unemployment is a price worth paying. That's what happened under Thatcher, and this government, at its peril, would take the risks with the economy and the livelihoods of the people of the United Kingdom.
I thank my right honourable friend for giving way. And is surely not the time come for the country to see that the Tory party, not by their words, but by their actions, are now enacting a policy of moving us towards a no-deal Brexit?
I am very, very grateful from my dear and honourable friend for that point, because I have to say to this House, and I have to say to the people of the United Kingdom, I am worried. I am really worried about what we are doing. And the risk of a no deal is something which is unthinkable. I need to make, with respect, I know there are many people that want to speak, and I do have to make progress. I will take interventions later on. But we have to be honest with people as to what these risks are, and I can say to this House that we in Scotland want no part of it. If the government and the Prime Minister wants to drive the bus over the cliff, we will not be in the passenger seat with this government.
Neither are you, mate.
Mr Speaker, you know, we often hear about the travails of the European Union, the nasty European Union, but I can tell you as someone that lives in the islands of Scotland that the European Union has been fantastic for our region. And you know, when I contrast the behaviour of the European Union with this government, people in the Highlands are right to be angry. Mr Speaker, the European Union agreed to give convergence uplift funds to our farmers and crofters on the basis of the low level of financial support that was in place. £160 million that should be handed over to Scottish crofters.
Where is it, David?
And where is it?
Where is it indeed?
It hasn't been handed over. Where has been the Secretary of State for Scotland in defending the interests of Scottish farmers and Scottish crofters? Scottish farmers and crofters that will pay a heavy price for Brexit. And the institution that's been standing up wanting to support them is not this House, it's not this government, it's the European Union. I know where I would put my... I will happily give way.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the right honourable member, first of all, for letting his party give me a seat in this place, but that is not for today.
Take it back.
Mr. Speaker, what the right honourable member says is quite correct, and it was a question that I put to the Prime Minister yesterday, which is that so much in terms of infrastructure projects would not have happened in my constituency had it not been for the European money, and this was crucial in halting the terrible drain of our brightest and best from the Highlands to leave and never return home again. That, I say, Mr. Speaker, is an issue that is hugely important to me, and it remains as such.
I thank the honourable gentleman. May I say to him it's the people of Caithness and Sutherland that gave him a seat in this place, and that we all serve with the goodwill and the ongoing support of our constituents, something anyone should ever take for granted. But, Mr. Speaker, I do want to make progress. I apologise. I have talked about Brexit, but I want to go on to about the record of this government. The Prime Minister talked about delivering a fairer society. Oh my goodness. Those of us that live in the Highlands have been in the pilot of universal credit, the damage which has been done to many of our people in many of our communities. I look at my colleagues in these benches, when I look at my honourable friend from Adrian Shotts, the member for Glasgow Central, if I look at the member for Inverness, Nairn, Badenoch and Strathspey, that day after day, week after week, have had to stand up and highlight the issues with universal credit, highlight the issues with the rape clause, highlight the issues with the two-child policy. And this government has simply not listened to the damage that has been done. It's a government obsessed with embedding a cruel and hostile environment for immigrants, their families and their children, and a government that continues to deny the rights of 1950s women. When I first came into this House, I was the SNP pension spokesperson. I lost count of the number of debates that I called and spoke in, highlighting the injustice that millions of women faced. Women that had worked all their life on anticipation that there was a contract between them and the state, that they would get their state pension. Women, in some cases, were given as little as 14 months' notice that their pensionable age was going to increase by as much as 6 years. That's the heartlessness and the cruelty of this government that left many of them in poverty because they ripped up the contract, because, Mr. Speaker, that's what it was between those individuals and the state. And I've appealed to the Prime Minister on many occasions to right that right. This government could easily have put its hands into the Treasury coffers. The National Insurance Fund sits at a surplus. I will happily give way.
Very grateful to the honourable member for giving way, and I would ask him, does he also agree with me that it is appalling that this government has slipped out in amongst all the news of Brexit, that they're making further changes to pensions, and that pensioners who have a partner under the age of pensions, they will have to claim universal credit instead?
My honourable friend is correct, and she's highlighted what this government's been doing, sneaking out these kind of announcements. I know that she is a doughty fighter for pensioners, as she will for young people, and we will stand up in this House for those that are affected that way. I will give way one more time.
Very grateful. He said earlier in his remarks that he's worried about economic growth, and I quite understand that, share that, those concerns. But is he also therefore worried that the Scottish economic growth is slowing, now growing at half the rate of the rest of the UK? And what is his party doing about that north of the border?
It's the wrong person to challenge without having done your homework.
Oh, good grief. And I have to say the honourable gentleman is mistaken that what has happened over the course of the last year, that growth in Scotland has overtaken that of the United Kingdom. But you know, Mr. Speaker, the majority of the controls of the Scottish economy don't sit with the Scottish Government, they sit with the Parliament here in London. We would dearly love to have full control of our destiny in Scotland, because one of the reasons that we desire independence is because our economic interests simply have not been looked after by Westminster. And
friend gets way.
I will in a second, but let me just say this. When I look in the rear-view mirror and I look at Scotland over the course of the last 100 years, our population has barely grown. Generations of young people have had to leave Scotland because of lack of economic opportunity. That's not the Scottish Government that's responsible for that, it's for Westminster. And I am delighted that there's a report which has come out from Highlands and Islands Enterprise over the course of the last few days. For the first time, the trend of young people staying and living in the Highlands has turned around. That's because of the investment that the Scottish Government is putting in young people, despite the challenges that we face of austerity from this Conservative Government.
I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend for giving way, and I do hope that the motion led by the Leader of the Opposition is successful this evening. Today, I believe, I was reminded today, is the 100th, nearly, it's an anniversary from 1913, of the Home Rule Act, one of the first Home Rule Acts for Ireland, which was agreed for by this House, but defeated in the other place. And in terms of control, yet again, and that's with due reference to the Democratic Unionist Party, are in control of the government opposite. If the vote is successful this evening, can my right honourable friend assure me that the Scottish National Party will have no truck with any government funding the Democratic Unionist Party and their type of politics?
I'm very grateful, and there's a very simple answer to that, and it is yes, of course. Mr. Speaker, I have been generous in taking interventions. I need to move on because when I glance at my notes, I see I'm only at page 2, and I'm sure that honourable members will want me to make some progress. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister and the Conservative Government have let us all down. Westminster, once again, has proven that it can only let Scotland down. The Scottish National Party has no confidence in the UK Government. Mr. Speaker, Scotland voted to remain. Now, let me say it again. Scotland voted to remain. I often hear the Prime Minister and others talking about the national interest. I would ask the Prime Minister to reflect on the fact that this is our nation of Scotland in a family of nations. And when we were told in 2014 that if we stayed in the United Kingdom that our rights as European citizens would be respected, what we find is that this government completely ignores the wishes of the Scottish people and wants to drag us out of the European Union against our will, to take away our rights that we have as EU citizens. Mr. Speaker, it can be no surprise that the contempt shown to Scotland by the Tories over the past couple of years has strengthened and reinforced the case for Scotland to be an independent country. Mr. Speaker, every reasonable attempt to compromise and to protect Scotland's interests by the Scottish Government has been spurned. The powers of the Scottish Parliament have been eroded. This place has taken back control. Well, I can hear the scoffing from the Tory benches, but when the Withdrawal Act went through, the SNP membership went up by 10,000 the next day, because the people of Scotland know that the Secretary of State for Scotland sat and did nothing, as the powers of Scotland over fishing, over farming, over agriculture, over the environment were taken back against the wishes of the Scottish Government.
Order. The House is overexcited, and although the right honourable gentleman is well able to look after himself, he must be heard. Sometimes there is a concerted and excessively noisy apparent attempt to interrupt, and that should not happen. Stuart Malcolm MacDonald.
They are a curious bunch, Mr. Speaker. Can I ask my right honourable friend, indeed all members across the House, to reflect on the fact that in 2014, sure, the Scottish people voted to stay in the UK, but 2 years later, they voted to stay in the EU. These two things are fundamentally incompatible because of the Prime Minister's desire to drag us out. So at some point, one will have to give. She might be able to delay that, but independence is inevitable, is it not?
Absolutely. Here. Can I just say to the honourable gentleman, it's coming yet for all that.
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, well, I will say this.
I hope she's in office
because I can hear from a sedentary position about this issue about whether we can demand a referendum. I'll simply say to the Tory benches that you have to respect the sovereignty of the people of Scotland.
That's right.
Because however you dress it up, when the Scottish National Party went to the people of Scotland in 2016, we won the election on a mandate, if there's a material change of circumstances, that we may seek to have a referendum on independence. There is the majority in the Scottish Parliament. Parliament in Edinburgh voted for it. This House, in July, debated a motion on the claim of right that recognised the sovereignty of the Scottish people. This House accepted that motion.
That's right.
If and when the Scottish Government comes to Westminster and asks for a Section 30 agreement, this Government should respect the democracy and the sovereignty of the Scottish people and allow it. Mr. Speaker, Scotland will never, not ever forget, or will we forgive, the utter contempt shown to our nation by this Prime Minister and the Government. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister and her Government cannot escape the reality. Her Government has led to political collapse in this country, hamstrung. This Government is completely frozen in its own failure. We have reached a dangerous impasse. With the clock ticking down, we need to remove this shambolic Conservative Government, extend Article 50 and, yes, give the people of the United Kingdom a say.
I thank my right honourable friend for giving way, and as ever he is giving a stunning account of the current situation. But does he agree with me that this Prime Minister has painted herself into this corner? She is going to have to give on at least some of her red lines, and it is deeply regrettable that she has waited till the 11th hour to reach out across the House, and that history will judge her on her deeds, not her words.
I absolutely agree, and of course, if I can make the reflection that in Scotland we do have a Parliament which is elected by proportional representation. We are used to minority government. We're used to having to reach a consensus, and indeed, if I look at the motion which was passed by the Scottish Parliament on the issue of Brexit, it was supported by the Scottish National Party, by the Labour Party, by the Liberal Democrats, by the Greens. Prime Minister, that's how you do it. And the Prime Minister in this House has simply misunderstood the challenges of trying to reach a consensus across Parliament. She is working with her own Brexit extremists and failing to work to build a consensus across this Parliament. I must make progress, I'm serious. Mr. Speaker, if the Prime Minister does survive today, she must now act to extend Article 50 and legislate for a people's vote. Now, I must turn to the Labour Party. The Scottish National Party were the first to table a motion of no confidence, supported by others, by the Liberal Democrats, Plaid Cymru and the Greens. We asked for that to be debated before Christmas. Now, we knew yesterday that the Government was giving active consideration to allowing a debate to have that vote today on the motion that was laid down by the Scottish National Party and others. The Labour Party have been shamed into bringing this motion, a motion that we should have discussed before Christmas. I welcome that we are having this debate today, but on the basis of what happens today, I appeal to our friends and colleagues in the Labour Party that we have to work together to hold this Government to account. And if we are to do that, then we have to recognise the harm that Brexit is going to do to all our constituents. It is time for the Leader of the Opposition, and I say respectfully to him, to recognise that there is no such thing as a jobs-first Brexit. That we have to recognise that if we want to protect the interests of our citizens, then it has to be a people's vote. We don't have time.
He's doing a job's work.
We don't have time, Mr Speaker. The Labour Party have to join us in that campaign today. And I say this to the Leader of the Opposition. All the young people that voted Labour in England in 2017 will be paying a price from the Labour Party if Jeremy Corbyn does not give that leadership. So I say to the Leader of the Opposition, get off that fence, come and join us. Take that opportunity today. Tell us once and for all that Labour will back a people's vote.
No.
Mr Speaker, I'm grateful to the Right Honourable Gentleman for giving way, and he mentioned the shame of the Labour Party. I wonder would he reflect on the shame of the Scottish National Party in Edinburgh on a day when college lecturers in Scotland are striking, when teachers in Scotland are considering industrial action, when waiting lists are going up and our educational standards are going down. That is the record of the SNP government in Scotland. Is he ashamed of that as well?
You know, Mr Speaker, the honourable gentleman used to sit in the Scottish Parliament. If he wants to debate devolved matters, I suggest he tries to get a seat back there again. But the issue...
Order! You always have a very amiable disposition, Mr Kerr, but you are becoming a mildly exuberant denizen of the House. Dare I say it, even in your conduct a tad, to deploy the word used by the honourable gentleman from North East Somerset, eccentric. Now, calm, zen, restraint. Try to cultivate the air of the elder statesman. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I am proud of the record of investment in public services by my government in Scotland. But the situation we face is austerity from Westminster, and we have taken the hard decisions. On the one hand, to ameliorate Tory austerity, but also to invest in our public services. And it's their Tory colleagues in the Scottish Parliament that want to cut taxes, that want to harden austerity, that will damage the interests of the people of Scotland. Mr Speaker, I want to move on and begin to conclude. The people of Scotland wish to remain in the European Union. We want a country of opportunity, a nation free from poverty, a country where immigrants are welcome and where refugees are given refuge. We want a Scotland without austerity, a Scotland where pensioners are paid their fair share, where workers have fair and equal pay, a real living wage, a Scotland where all children are treated equally, where our health service is protected and valued, a nation that will be healthier, wealthier and happier. Mr Speaker, the choice is clear. The United Kingdom is on a path to self-destruction. Without a change of course, Brexit will see our economy smaller, weaker, poorer. Mark Carney from the Bank of England said that Brexit had already cost each family £600. That's what's already happened, and we know that a hard Brexit will cost each household in Scotland £1,600, pushing struggling families to the brink and already poor families into destitution. Without single market and customs union membership, the future relationship can only be FTA, introducing barriers to Scottish companies' ability to trade. This will damage jobs, investment, productivity and the earnings and will hit the most disadvantaged in society hardest. As we know, Mr Speaker, that people who choose to live and work in this country on these islands are net contributors to our economy. If net migration is reduced by a significant number, we will be poorer economically and fiscally. That would be catastrophic, not just for workers but for our economy. Mr Speaker, after a decade of Tory austerity, our economy has already suffered enough. The SNP will not stand by and allow the UK government to ride roughshod over Scotland's future. This government must go, and it must go today. But, Mr Speaker, I've said it before, and our First Minister of Scotland has reiterated it today. The only way for Scotland to protect its interests and for our nation to thrive is to once and forever be rid of this place and instead be an independent nation in the European Union.
Or, on account of the level of demand, a 5-minute limit on